This is Candid Conversations with Dr. Mayfield, a podcast that resources families and friends with tools to have important conversations about mental and emotional health. This show is sponsored by Mayfield Counseling Centers, helping you find clarity, hope, and purpose. Here's your host, Trevor Sheeran.
Thank you for joining us on Candid Conversations. I'm excited about today's topic, as I know Dr. Mayfield is as well. We're talking about what it means to be living in a world that is online.
So do we need to mark that we're safe from the bomb cyclone? Is that what we do? Yeah. Is that what we do online when things are, we mark ourselves safe? For those of you that are listening and don't know what we're talking about, you probably have been experiencing it across Nebraska and, Kansas and the East Coast, but we had 75-mile-an-hour winds and snow going sideways and people...
Snow, probably better defined as just ice.
Ice, yeah. It was nuts. But that's what you do, right? I mean, you mark yourself safe on social media, right, if something happened.
Which is a really good segue into what we're talking about today, because I am of the belief that we are living in a world that is online. Everything we do is online. Mm-hmm. And even the things that we do that feel like they're not connected to the internet or social media, they still seem to somehow leave a mark on the internet.
I saw on online that the internet was 30 years old this week.
Dang.
And I'm like, okay, so do I remember what it was like when the internet wasn't here? I had almost 8 years without the internet not being here. And it was just, I think it was just being the kid, right? The simplicity of being a kid playing outside and those kinds of things. And so it's interesting from your perspective that's never not known the internet. Yeah. And other individuals that we work with, it's kind of that you have a dualistic life being built, or I don't know what you think about that, but it's interesting just to think about we've not always had this. Right. And let's be honest, it's only been 3 decades.
And I think the internet is speeding up a lot of processes that were there already, that were just going a lot slower. Like my wife and I were talking about a certain internet hoax scare thing. She was really frustrated with just the state of the world and how did we get so bad? And I just had to remind her it's always been this bad, and things like this have been going on for a lot longer than we'd like to think. The only reason that it seems so bad is because we know about it. Ooh. I mean, think about the speed at which news can travel now. If something happens in another country, normally without the internet, we wouldn't have heard about it until next week. Mm-hmm. Now we hear about it almost instantaneously.
Well, right, the tragedy that happened in Christchurch last night, right, with the mosque shooting. Without the internet, it would have been, reporter, paper, go to print, it'd be maybe a day or two delayed, 30 years ago. Yeah. Now it's, we get I don't know if I took this off my phone because I was tired of it, but I follow 3 different news channels, just to get a flavor of all the different types. And I actually had to take it off because I was getting alerts. This is happening here, this is happening here, this is happening here, this is happening here. And I can't. Right,
you're getting all of the bad news from the entire planet in your pocket. Yeah. And that's going to do something to your headspace.
Right. Yeah, it can't information overload, right? And so this idea of living, having a life on the internet or with our kids, we talk a lot in schools about social media and the pitfalls there. And that's one piece of it, though. I mean, think about the access of information like we just talked about for these kids that are in the formidable stages of brain development, emotional development, and those kinds of things. I mean, it was one thing for you growing up in the 90s and 2000s. It was different for me in the 80s and 90s. I don't think we had a computer in the house until I was 1996, 97. And so it wasn't something that I always had to have. But then I look at, my phone, and the day that I forget my phone, I was out yesterday after the snowstorm going to get some groceries and left my phone at home, and I was completely panicked.
Right.
Why?
Well, and I think there's a lot to be said about the addiction to blue light.
Sure.
And we'll have to do another episode on that. What really fascinates me is with all the news that we get instantaneously, it seems as if there's been this outbreak of a dominant or famous figure who is either cast out by society or removed from a project or removed from an opportunity because of something that they said on social media or the internet like a decade ago. Mm-hmm. And I think from my perspective as a 25-year-old guy, I've been on the internet, actively for only, a couple years now. Probably since I was 18 or so, probably 16, let's be honest.
It's almost 10 years.
So almost 10 years. And thinking about all of the stupid things that I said on the internet back when I was 16, the things that I put up there without the understanding that, that's going to be on there forever. And I think forever is a hard concept to grasp.
Well, and if you talk with most teens, and like I've done a focus group before, I've done just conversations with my clients going, when you put this on, it's not going to ever go away.
Yeah.
And they have a hard time connecting the two because it feels like it's just airing their dirty laundry or, having a chance to express themselves.
Right. Which it is.
It is. And yet we don't understand how it's a digital snapshot and a footprint that never fully goes away. And we see this happening all the time now. Like I think you were alluding to this, but of like you said, famous people or politicians or even just well-meaning individuals that are trying to work hard. And 12 years ago when they were twice as stupid as they are now or whatever, and they're as they're maturity-wise, and say something that they never thought through or really don't believe, but they just put it out there.
Right, because they thought it was funny or it was just easy. And I think that there's not as much of a security system with your phone as there is in talking, because you can just pull out your phone and tweet something in an instant, whereas in a conversation you have to think about it a little bit. And I, of all people, am not going to say that social media is bad or evil or anything like that. I just think it's really important that we kind of spend some time thinking about how what we posted 5 years ago is going to affect us down the road, could affect us. And I think having the mindset of it will, when we're posting something today, of is this something that I want to have said 10 years from now?
Well, let's be honest, and this is, it's funny that we're talking about this because I was thinking about my own stuff that I've posted, and I love how Facebook reminds you of your memories.
Oh my gosh!
And things that you've posted, or those kinds of and I haven't done anything really too terribly stupid, but Facebook's the only thing I really have gotten into, and I know that saying that I've aged myself just because everything that else is out there.
Almost more so than giving your age
earlier
in the episode.
Right, I know, and it's sobering to go, okay, I posted that 10 years ago. Wow, okay, I've come a long way, I've matured a lot. But, I don't know what else is out there right now. Snapchat and Instagram. And, there's new stuff coming out every day that I'm not even, sure I know about. But it's how do we have these conversations with our kids to help them understand the impact that it has? Because, and I've made this decision myself because I lead a company, because I've been speaking and I'm writing and that kind of stuff. A lot of my more intimate opinions about politics or religion or whatever, I keep to conversation with close friends and family. I don't air my dirty laundry or those kinds of things on social media. And that was something I decided a long time ago, that it could have a greater impact than just me if I do those kinds of things.
Yeah. And I think we're in a time where we're really seeing that reflected back to us as a almost warning sign of social media is not a safe platform to free associate. I was taught this back early in my college days by a guy we both know, Brandon Cormier, who looked at my Twitter feed and was like, dude, do you even think before you post any of this stuff? And the answer was no. Like, right. I didn't. I had a thought or a gripe or a funny comment and just shot it over, and that was it. Didn't think about it. And looking back on those, like they're all deleted, and so it's harder to find those.
Sure. But if you're running for office tomorrow, for political office, somebody could find it.
They'd be there.
Right.
And even if somebody really wanted to look longer, like there's internet archives and there's all sorts of stuff. And it wasn't anything that was inappropriate or crass. It was just like immature comments that would have been better off to like write on a piece of paper and throw it away, or just think it and then let it go. And there's a lot of maturity that happens in that, and a lot of maturity that's necessitated by paying attention to what you're putting on the internet.
Well, and I think along with that, what does it say to the person that's reading it on the other side? That if you want to portray yourself as a 25-year-old who is a master's student, is working really hard, has got things together, and you post something like this that undermines everything that you've been working for, we don't think about that. And you look at people in the spotlight, and I won't name names right now, but I can think of a half dozen people over the last 6 months that have either ended their careers because of something they posted, or have just perpetuated this persona of ignorance and stupidity by what they've been posting. And the accounts of that we hear from people that know these individuals, like, that's not them at all. This is not, like, well, then why the heck are you posting this stuff on social media? And these are adults. These are like grown 30, 40, 50-year-old individuals that are...
Which I actually think is a deficit in this situation.
Tell me more.
So for individuals like yourself that had existence before the internet, you've had the full 30 years to make a presence on there. And if we look at our culture, 30 years ago is very different than it is today.
You mean parachute pants and gold chains and all
that too? But even like gay marriage, or even like wars and different religious associations, like the view of those things 30 years ago was vastly different than it is today.
It's true.
And our culture is not very good at translating between times. If somebody said in the 1800s that wrote a book, and in the book they said that trees in X country were pitiful and weak, and over the centuries that country of X turned into a wasteland or something, and some tragedy happened and now they are weak, we wouldn't look at the time between what the author was writing about and what happened to that country. We would just take what that author said about the country and the country as we know it now and apply it. And so when somebody says something that may have been culturally appropriate, whether that was good or bad 30 years ago, and pull it to today, we don't do the kind of work to see like, oh, okay, we're not excusing this behavior, and also this was 30 years ago and this was the common thought of the time. And so I think it's a detriment, or not a detriment, but I think that the young people actually have the upper hand in this because we've had less time.
No, that makes sense.
And as we're seeing people have career downfalls because of stuff they've said on the internet, we can hopefully have a little bit of cognitive dissonance and say, maybe I should think twice about tweeting this.
Well, and I think it brings up a good point too, that I'm not sure how I feel about the PC culture, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think on social media you have to be PC, right? To be honest, you have to work on being politically correct. You have to work on understanding your audience and what's going to get out there and those kinds of things.
Because it's written.
Because it's written, right? But I think in conversation, though I appreciate the foundation of what PC meant and means, it has the potential to remove conversation.
Yeah, and that's being politically correct. If you don't pick up on the acronym.
Yeah. So if you and I can have conversations that are not politically correct because we want to get down to the understanding of what it feels like for you, what it means to you, your experiences, and those kinds of things. And that's safe because we're not recording it.
Right.
But if you put it, if you don't think through it and you don't put it on, before you put it on social media, it's out there, and people aren't going to care what your intentions were, and they're not going to care who you are as a human being. they're going to read your words and go, this person's racist.
Right.
And you're like, well, no, they just didn't think through what they're putting out there. And maybe it is a microaggression that comes across
Totally.
as racist or whatever. But if you and I are having a conversation and something
There's
said,
relationship.
I can ask you a question. Hey, that came across kind of racist. Is that what you intended? Oh, no. Here's what I'm trying to work out my thoughts on. But you can't do that on social media.
No.
Or internet.
And I think that's, some of the translation problem too is in relationship, it's so much easier to say, oh, author was talking about tree in country X. And I know author. And so I know what they were saying. And this makes sense because I understand more about this person than just this one statement.
Right.
With the internet, you kind of lose all that because there's that confirmation bias issue as well, where if I want to look up that the earth is flat, there's plenty of scholarly, I'm using air quotes, articles that would back up that assumption.
Well, let me ask you this, from your perspective and just your generation and even younger, what need is being met in somebody that feels like they have to air everything out on social media?
It's a really good question, and I think it ties into what we're going to talk about next week, about this desire to be famous as a smokescreen for the true need of just being seen.
Okay. Well, definitely save that for next week's podcast. But as I'm thinking about all this, going, okay, I understand brain development. I understand how it's delayed because of screen time and social media.
Yeah.
We can do a whole podcast on this, right? But I still scratch my head and go, why? Why did you post that? What was the purpose behind it? Because there's people I respect that are out there that are entertainers, that are in the spotlight, right? That realize that they're just entertainers, and their opinion on political matters or religious matters or world politics, culture, whatever, really doesn't matter.
Well, and I think I would go back to your comment about parachute pants. I think that there are just things that we get caught up in as a culture, and looking back, it's pretty ridiculous looking, but at the time it wasn't. Like, that was just the thing to do.
And they're coming back in style too, I think, aren't they?
To
some degree. I
haven't seen much.
I saw somebody wearing the one the other day at the grocery store, and I'm like,
I know those like fisherman pants are coming in style, and those are kind of parachute-esque. I mean,
we digress, but
it's all cyclical. We're always just doing the same thing, just a little bit differently.
Well, so I think motivation, I look forward to talking about that next podcast, but when it comes to thinking through these things with our kids or with our significant others or with our families, with ourselves, like, what do you do before you post? Like, what are some good pointers? Because you tweet still, don't you? I mean,
I do.
Yeah.
I do. I'm laughing because it's so dumb. I will write it out, and I've done this less and less. Like, I've grown out of this a little bit, but I'll write it out and then I'll delete it.
So you actually mean type it out on the?
Yeah. So I'll go to
when I hear write it out, I'm like pen and paper.
Oh, no. Okay. So I'll go on Facebook and I'll type in something really stupid like, I'm so hungry now I could eat a Tyrannosaurus Rex, and it like makes no sense, and then I'll delete it, and then I'll rewrite it and be like, I haven't eaten since breakfast, and I feel so hungry that I could eat a Tyrannosaurus Rex. And then by the third iteration of it, I just delete it and forget about it.
It's like, why would I even? Yeah.
And what I found was it was kind of like a grain of sand in my brain, and I just needed to express it somehow to get it out of my head. And it didn't actually need to be posted anywhere. Nobody had to see it. It just had to like come out of me somehow. And that was really helpful in allowing me to not post, because that's stupid. Like, and that is probably the level of stupidity that I was posting. Of like, why?
Nobody wants to know that I'm tired or I'm feeling this way.
Right. Nobody needs to know that. Why are you talking about a T-Rex instead of a horse? Like, it was dumb.
Yeah.
But I've started to, as I've gotten older and as I've gained more of a intentional presence online, to kind of think like, okay, does this fit with who I am online? And there is a bit of a dualistic mind of who I am in the real world and who I am online. And who I am online is probably a little bit more safe and rounded than who I am in person, because there's that lack of relationship.
It's interesting you say that, because I'm thinking about, and I'd love to have our listeners go to check out on YouTube, hashtag being 13, which was a CNN documentary by Anderson Cooper, fantastic. And it was following these teenagers and their posts, 13-year-olds. And I think hundreds of thousands of posts, and finding out, and then meeting them in person and having that conversation. And this term by a recent psychologist called digiphrenia, is this idea that we're creating two personalities. It's almost a split personality. You've got your physical self and you've got your digital self. And you say that you really try hard to make sure that what you put online now is what people see when they meet you, and maybe a safer version online. And
right.
But we find with the teenagers on the hashtag being 13 documentary that that's not the case at all. It's this meek, mild, has a hard time looking in the eye teenager who's telling her friends to go, and do this to that person and this thing on that. And so it's just interesting that the last 30 years has almost created and beginning to create generations with multiple personalities, and not from a diagnostic standpoint, from a psychology standpoint, but from a is what you see is what what you see online, is that what you get when you meet them, and vice versa.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's scary, and and I think it's just something that intentionality can go so far to heal and to fix and to keep us safe in.
Well, and it goes to a bigger conversation that we can't have today, but what do we do as parents? How do we empower our kids to do this well versus keeping them from it, right? Because I think this is not going to go away. It's just going to get more and more complex. And so how do we create a generation of kids that are intentional, that are mindful of what they're doing? And that goes back to a whole nother conversation on parenting.
Yeah, it does. We'll probably put out a part 2 to this episode talking about that.
Right.
Because I think that's especially if you don't have a frontal lobe, you're not able to make the best decisions for yourself, and you're given this instantaneous tool.
Well, you've got a frontal lobe, but it's not plugged in.
Fair. Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
We
It's there.
It's there.
Non-operational.
Biologically, it's there. Yeah. but how do you help our kids plug it in, right?
Yeah. Or if they can't at the moment, how do you kind of help them out and supplement their frontal lobe?
Yep.
At least when it comes to the internet.
So it sounds like we have a part 2 coming.
Yep. Look out for that, and also look out for next week's episode talking about why there is such a drive for social media.
Thank you for joining Candid Conversations. If you would like more information, you can email candid@mayfieldcounseling.com.